Generally, you said feminism is
neutral. Here's what actually happened.
The foundation of all knowledge.
Money. I'm really mad that
what difference does it make, right? What
Stop.
The deregulation of the industry is obviously going to cause more of that industry.
And to lubricate the trust connection between people until they have enough.
Yet we could still look at biological reality in determining who's a female, even if there are.
Why don't you denounce feminism the same way you're denouncing capitalism? If you don't...
For something to be objective, it needs to be verifiable. And you can't verify...
If I make a claim as a political pundit, it is true that I definitely could be wrong.
Yeah,
you're promoting, right?
Ideologies that make that politics, right? This is my ideology.
Yeah, but...
So, 2015, anyone go back and watch the footage? The first GOP debate...
Cool, Robert. Oh, they're dead? With a crowbar, you said?
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I am Sara, the Raging Tomato, bringing to you live another Moderator Monday. This evening, I have with me Ryan C. Mullally, I think I did it right this time, and Lawyerchick as well, joining me for a fine, fun debate of the right should abolish the Department of Education. Ryan, if you'd like to kick off with your opening statement, please. Oh, you are muted on maybe your end.
Oh, sorry about that. An auspicious beginning. Well, thanks, Sara, for having me on. Thanks, Lawyerchick, for being my friend across the V tonight. And yeah, I'm Ryan C. Mullally. I'm an attorney, but I'm also, as probably pertinent tonight, a former teacher. I was a Teach for America Corps member. I taught for 7 years in really economically disadvantaged areas of Brooklyn, and before I went to law school. And I'm here to deliver the bad news. Our education system is terrible. It does not deliver good outcomes for students. Our data is not strong. Our students are struggling, and we're spending enormous amounts of money to prop up a system that fundamentally does not work. And unfortunately, the Department of Education plays a central role in the struggles that our schools are having right now, and is actually making these problems worse and making our school more inefficient, and our children having what I would say is demonstrably worse results. And we don't have to do this. If you look in the Constitution, you will never see the word education. There's nothing in the Constitution that says we should have a Department of Education, that the federal government should be in charge of education. In fact, the education is the type of domestic policy which is expressly left to the states. It is the sort of thing the states should do. And in fact, local government should do, and communities should do. Why? Because nobody knows the needs of a community better than the people in that community. And nobody cares more about the kids in the community than the parents and the educators in that community. And we should allow those communities to make decisions on their own, which unfortunately is not the case today. So let's flash back in time and examine the history. Because for all of us probably watching this, unless you're of a certain age, you can't imagine life without a Department of Education. But prior to 1979, we didn't have one. We sent men to the moon. We raised and educated Nobel laureates without a Department of Education. It is not the sort of thing that was always here. In fact, we've had other options that worked better. Now, what is the legacy of Department of Education? Well, If you look at data from the NAEP, and I have the acronym written down here, it's the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is a test that's administered to 4th and 8th graders periodically. And it's kind of it doesn't affect their grade, so they don't cram for it. It's a fair baseline that lets you compare educational achievement across time. Our data has flatlined. It hasn't gotten better since the Department of Education was instituted. What has happened, though, is that our spending per student has tripled from around $6,000, roughly tripled, it's a little bit less, from around $6,000 per student to around $17,000 per student per year in inflation-adjusted real dollars. This is a crazy amount of money to spend to not make anything better. Now, the question is, why is the Department of Education causing these problems? And how do they contribute? Well, a few ways. First, the Department of Education promotes what's called unfunded mandates. They mandate policies and then they give the states some money. And because the states accept federal money in the education context, the states then have to accept all the rest of the federal policies. And you see this play out. Now, why do Department of Education work this way? Well, it's because legally speaking, there is no educational power. The Congress cannot actually dictate ed policy to the states, but they do have a spending power. So they can attach policy restrictions to money they give the states. And when the states accept it, that creates obligations on the states. Now, what happens with those obligations? Well, they push programs like Common Core. They push programs like No Child Left Behind, which have had pretty bad impacts on students and have hollowed out our standards and have led us to where we are right now, where if you go into schools right now, one of the key concerns is social promotion. They want to make sure every student gets promoted. They're less concerned with whether any student knows anything. So what you have now, for example, in Detroit, when you have students graduate, only 50% of them are actually on a high school graduate level. You see this nationally. I think it's less than half of people who graduate high school read on the appropriate level. Now, what does that do? It means that we have lots of people graduating who aren't at the same level academically that they should be when they graduate. Now, what else does the DOE do besides K-12 policy? Because that's not all they do. The DOE also creates a massive incentive for everybody to go to college. They provide student loans, no questions asked. They subsidize demand for college. What does that do? It raises the price of college because now every student has loans in their pocket, no questions asked. So the price of a college education goes up. But now colleges are admitting all these students who don't have the same level of educational achievement. So what happens? The standards go down and suddenly college is meaningless. It doesn't actually teach anything. It's not even a good sorting hat for grades. It's just hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt that unfortunate students who maybe were sent there and shouldn't have been end up being saddled with. And what does it do? It does the same thing any bureaucracy does, any centralized bureaucracy. It creates inefficiency. And on top of that, it creates a national set of standards, and those national sets of standards stifle innovation. We should have a system that works better. There are other alternatives. We should be sending more kids into the trades where they'll be successful, they'll make money, they'll have careers, and they won't be saddled with debt. But we don't. We should do a lot of things, but we don't. And one of the reasons why is that the Department of Education has centralized inappropriately our educational model, which stifles competition, stifles innovation, and ends up creating all the problems that we were hoping to solve. We should return the power to the states. Now, here's the thing, and this is the brutal truth. Abolishing the Department of Education will not solve all these problems on its own. We would have to then have subsequent reforms. We'd have to look at charter schools. We'd have to look at teachers' unions. We would have a lot of work to do, but it is a necessary first step because until you do this, very few other steps are possible. Now, there's a few objections that you often hear about abolishing the Department of Education. What about the money that the Department of Education sends to Title I schools? The money can be sent by another department. And this is actually in Trump's plan. That would be sent to a different, I think it'd be the Interior or Health and Human Services who would do that money going forward. What about civil rights enforcement? What about IDEA, which is the Individualized Education Act, which is what sets up IEPs and other special needs programs? What about civil rights? That can be enforced to the extent they need to be enforced by the DOJ. What about setting national standards? Well, setting national standards has, in my lifetime as an educator, been a disaster. Every time it's been tried, it has not worked well. Maybe we should, instead of trying to focus on setting national standards, allow the states to experiment, allow us to see what models work and what don't, allow federalism to work and see what is more successful. Ultimately, there is no argument that the people sitting in DC, the bureaucrats in DC, care more about the kids in your community than the parents there do. There is no argument that they're more connected to the needs of your community. The question is, who should have ultimate decision-making power about how to raise and educate children? And the answer is the people with skin in the game, the people who are raising those kids, the people in those communities. And while abolishing the DOE will not solve all these problems, it is the first necessary step in the right direction.
Thank you, Ryan. And Lawyerchick, over to you, please.
Okay, so I love the comments, and I also have a background as a teacher and then a lawyer, and I didn't know you were in a Teach for America program for 7 years. So that is excellent insight that I can break down. So I do not think that the Department of Education should be completely abolished. I don't think it's perfect. I also don't think it's the cause of all of the problems that you're naming. First of all, where did it come from? What was its purpose? Its purpose was, it was formed in 1980. The Department of Education was initially formed to create equal access of resources and, I guess, balance the playing field in terms of educational funding. The Department of Education mandates or, I guess, creates policy so that money from wealthier states can flow into states that are less funded in terms of education. If we do go to a purely locally funded and run system of education that's just completely run at the local, county, and then statewide level, I think you'll have a massively, you'll have diverse education state by state, but you'll also have erratically different funding state by state, because schools are indeed funded by property taxes. And that is why in wealthier areas where property taxes are higher, you often have better schools. Now, with that being said, in my home state of New Jersey, it's actually not fair, in many people's opinions, that money is pulled from wealthier counties and brought into counties that have lower property taxes. People don't see the results that they're maybe expecting in terms of test scores, et cetera. But I'm not sure that abolishing the Department of Education, again, is going to improve what the problems are. The issue of people not graduating, students not graduating with adequate reading scores, social promotion, those things are happening at the district levels. I don't believe that's a push from the federal level to make that happen. I mean, DC public schools just had a scandal 4 years ago. They were literally changing grades. I'll be honest, in my own school district, I have known teachers who have gotten pushed to create grades out of nothing just because they're pushed to by parents, parent pressure. That's not a federal issue. That's a parent issue. And indeed, it's actually a local issue. So again, I'm not sure that abolishing the Department of Education is going to solve some of the problems that you're mentioning. I do agree that it's flawed. I do not love the way special education is. I don't even like the law around IDEA. So, if we were, that would be a whole nother debate that I'd love to get in with you. I'm probably one of the few educational attorneys or attorneys with education background that really, really despises special education and the way it plays out and the time and the expense that it takes. But again, I don't know that that's necessarily a federal issue. So the question is, what would we lose if we abolished the Department of Education? And as a child advocate, I would say we would lose a lot. And definitely we have to talk about Title I funding. I do have some data here. Title I funding is approximately, where am I? Stand by, everybody. Let me find my, I had a really good chart. Here we go. So 15% of your students receive special education funding. And again, that's an area that I really don't agree with. That's $15 billion of our money goes to students with disability. However, Title I supports a lot of things, particularly for elementary schools. These are kids that really that are in need of smaller class sizes, reading specialists, after school programs, after school enrichment. And you talked about pushing students into trade programs. Trade and career technical education is run by the Fed. That is a part of the Department of Education. And that is something that it's called a Perkins grants. And that goes into training students for job readiness right out of high school. And I would say now under the Trump administration, that is being pushed even more. And student loans, which is another problem that is absolutely run out of the Department of Education, has been completely reformed. And now under the big, beautiful bill, there is a cap on student loan access, $60,000 for undergrad, $150,000 for professional school. So some of the issues that were really truly problematic under the Department of Education are being moved, changed, switched out into different departments. So some of the problems that you're calling out are already being dealt with without completely abolishing the Department of Education. I'm on the fence about civil rights in education. I don't know that, I don't know that it's like a balancing act, right? Is having a Department of Civil Rights and the Department of Education is allowing students to, sue the school district for different types of discrimination worth the loss that would occur if the students didn't have that right. I'm not really sure about that, but we would lose that I guess, concept of civil rights for schools. We would lose the department that oversees not just civil rights like discrimination, racial discrimination, gender discrimination, but also the Department of Education supports migrant education. And I know everybody in this panel probably doesn't give a shit about migrant children. These are farm worker children. These are children that move due to their parents' work, mostly housed between California and Texas. There's a massive migrant education program in certain states, and some states have none. But if you go to a state like California, migrant education is pretty significant, and it creates a lot of funding for kids. Another thing that would be lost would be Head Start. You've got 1 million infants, toddlers, and pre-K that do get identified for special education services. That's 1 million little ones under the age of 3 that are identified before they even get into a kindergarten classroom with education needs. And I think that, or with special education needs. And as much as, again, I don't love special ed, I think that Head Start and giving kids an opportunity to go to preschool, if their parents can't afford the daycare that is extraordinarily expensive in this country, I think that's important, and I think that would be lost. We have 26 million children who receive Title I funding related services, and we have 43 million people with student loans. Again, I don't want to make student loans the topic of this because it's so flawed, but we use federal money that comes from the Fed for family engagement services, for mental health services, to deal with national crises like COVID. I think No Child Left Behind was abysmal. I think Common Core sucks. There's no doubt about that. But I also think that states already run a lot of education, educational policy. States run curriculum. States run teacher credentialing. States run, local school districts run policy. Another department that is housed under the another section of education that's housed under the Department of Education is Indian education. So the tribes get block grants from the Department of Education, and that indeed is given to K-12. there's more Indian education that's covered in the Department of the Interior. But remember, I mean, I guess the Indian Commerce Clause is part of the Constitution. There's nothing in the, I mean, as you said, there's nothing in the US Constitution that even, the word education isn't even in there. So there's nothing that really mandates that our federal government have any kind of hand in education. But I think it is, I mean, again, it was formed just to create some kind of economic equity. And I think I'm going to leave it there because I'm sure other things will come up and I have all kinds of notes that I'll bring out.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And as a kind reminder to the audience, we are going to get through the debate. Then we will move into closing statements. We will read and respond to your kind super chats. And then, of course, your favorite part of the evening, we will move into open panel. Lady and gentlemen, I leave the floor open to you.
Well, we have a surprising amount of agreement. So, just to tick off things that I think we agree on, the student loan program has been an unmitigated disaster. That's been a Department of Education initiative. Common Core, unmitigated disaster, DOE initiative. No Child Left Behind, unmitigated disaster, DOE initiative. The current state of special education and the inefficiencies and perverse incentives it creates, pretty much a disaster, though it's had some, I guess, some bright spots, but it's been pretty rough for people who are in the classroom. That's another DOE initiative. These are a lot of failures for the DOE. Now, what are the things that I think we agree are things the DOE does well? I think we both like Title I funding. Title I funding is an initiative where the federal government gives money to school districts where I think I forgot the exact numbers. I think if it's 75% of the students are under the poverty line by census data, they get the maximum. And then there's some cutoffs that go beneath that if you have lesser percentages. And we think that's a good thing. But in the Trump plan, that just gets moved to a different department. It's not going away. It's just getting moved. Now, why is that a good thing? It goes back to what I was saying in the opening about the way the DOE mandates policy. Common Core, No Child Left Behind sucked. And I'm sure we're going to get into why they sucked, but they were terrible for teachers, terrible for students. And just to give you a sneak preview, No Child Left Behind mandated rigorous data testing. And everyone said, oh my God, isn't this going to be so great? It was a disaster.
It was the worst.
Why was it a disaster? Because schools realized they were going to lose funding if the kids were failing the tests year after year. So if you had a kid who was failing and they were going to take the test in third grade, instead of holding them back and making them accountable to the standard, they would social promote them so that the kids wouldn't keep failing the test and screw up the school's data and cost them federal funding. And this created the era of social promotion. And you had a boom of social promotion, ironically, in No Child Left Behind because of the perverse incentives. And how did the federal government force No Child Left Behind? Through the funding given by the DOE.
So do you think that it was No Child Left Behind that pushed social promotion, or do you think that's something that's, because it's happening now?
I think social promotion, and this is the thing I'm going to have to be honest about, is that getting rid of the DOE will not fix all these problems. It's just a starting point. Social promotion is a norm that is being percolated in teachers' colleges and being pushed down as the kind of a moral imperative. And it's just a terrible fucking idea. This is not a one cause problem, but No Child Behind made it a lot worse. Like in the No Child Left Behind era, social promotion became the norm because if you were a school, you couldn't afford to let these kids keep failing tests because your data would tank and you'd lose your funding. Everyone knows this. Sorry, not everyone. Chatters might not know. The problem with putting these standards on teachers is that teachers, if they're unscrupulous, can obviously control the outcome of a test. They can obviously control if a kid's going to be promoted. They control the data. They control the environment. And if you put this kind of pressure on them, like No Child Left Behind did, where they said, if your data's not good, you lose your funding. Lo and behold, the data's good. Everyone gets promoted to the next grade, but nobody learned anything. And it creates all the wrong incentives.
I want to make a comment on something in the chat. Indian education. the word is, when you're talking about Native Americans, and you're talking about government, Indian. They call themselves Indians. The word Indian is in the Constitution. The word Indian is in the law. It's not offensive. So maybe it's based, but it's also completely reasonable.
And the Department of Interior, I think you said, already houses a lot of that funding. They could certainly house it going forward. Like when I say that I don't want the DOE doing this, it's not that I'm necessarily opposed to the funding. What I'm opposed to is that then you have DOE bureaucrats who view themselves as educators, and they attach these education policies to the money, and the education policies are always terrible. So I would much rather that money be allocated by a disinterested interior bureaucrat who's saying, like, yeah, my job is to give the money to the community. My job is not to tell them how to spend it. That I think would work quite a lot better than the system we have right now. Now, I would prefer to have a lot less federal government in general, but if we're going to take incremental steps, that would be a step in the right direction.
Okay, so what about your idea of just leaving it to the states? I think you said, let them figure it out. Let's test it. Let's see what works. Who would pull together the data to see what works and share best practices, et cetera, if we completely abolish the Department of Education? I mean, doesn't there need to be a central center or a central place for data conversations, staffing, whatever, just to at least coordinate all 50 states?
I don't think we need a governmental.
Are we making America great again here?
I don't think we need a governmental solution for that. I mean, in many areas, we have universities who conduct longitudinal studies. We have, state governments collect data. They can share that data. And we're seeing innovation right now, like places like Texas, the Mississippi Miracle that happened recently, Florida, particularly the states that have bucked the trend, and in case of Texas, have rejected federal money, are doing innovative things. And the funny thing about that is their data is getting better. Like
wait. Texas has rejected federal money?
I think they were the holdout on Common Core, if I recall correctly.
And their data is better?
In that Common Core has been a train wreck and they sidestepped the train wreck. Yeah, I think their data has improved as a result. The problem with Common Core is that parents hate it, communities hate it, nobody likes it. So if you're able to not teach it, one of the things that you get is just better buy-in with your parents. Because for those of you who have never done Common Core is the system that gave us it's inappropriate for you to line up 2 digits and 2 digits and add them long form. Like long form addition, long form multiplication isn't a thing that should be taught. Memorization of multiplication tables shouldn't be taught. It's a
bizarre.
Bad idea.
It's just bizarre.
It's a bad idea.
It's bizarre.
And parents loathe it. And the parents who loathe it the most are the ones who are familiar with it. And the longer it's been out, the more the data shows that parents hate this stuff. So I think that, it's when districts avoid this, it's a good thing. I think that there's been some weird trends in education, and a lot of that does come, unfortunately, from the federal government. I think, were you teaching during No Child Left Behind?
Yeah.
Oh my God. This is you ask any teacher, everybody who taught in that period hated this goddamn program. And everyone knew it wasn't going to work. At my school, we called it flatland because what it meant was that the only thing that mattered was the data you could fit in a spreadsheet. So as long as you could write down little Johnny learned to read today, everything was great. Whether little Johnny knew how to read, irrelevant. So, it created a whole network of problems.
Yeah, we called it No Child Left Standing.
Are you sure you're not on my side?
I know. Not necessarily, because I want another group of students, the most vulnerable students that are affected or that are supported by the Department of Education and federal funding and communication among states. Not only migrant students, which I see in the chat, most of people here don't want them in schools, but too bad. Plier Veto would disagree with you. Immigrant students have a right to an education at K-12. Homeless students, I actually use the McKinney-Vento Act quite a bit for homeless students. McKinney-Vento is a federal law that says if a student is in transition, they are entitled to go to their home school. They're entitled to get busing to their home school, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that homeless students are served by the Department of Education. Also, foster children are served, and foster, services, extension of foster children services. Yes, it's under the Department, I guess, of probably, what is it, like Health and Human Services, but also the Department of Education provides a lot of support for foster children, and that goes up through college.
I guess the thing that I always wonder about when people because there's all these wonderful programs that kind of pull on your heartstrings, but is the thought that like the states, if given their druthers, would just be like, you know who we hate? Foster kids. Like if given our druthers, we're just gonna put them in the closet. Kids. We're gonna do like a little bit of a Harry Potter situation. They live under the stairs. Like I'm not sure why there's this view that states would be so hostile to their own children if not for the federal government looking over their shoulder. I've never understood it. I don't think it's true. And I do think, though, that the oversight is vastly expensive. I mean, the DOE spends $4 billion a year on itself. It teaches no children. It has no educational programs. It's $4 billion a year to be a department. That's
4% of the federal budget, 4,800 employees.
It's a pretty big, for the fact that it doesn't teach anybody, it's a pretty big deal. And I know you don't want to make this a student loan debate, and I understand why, because the student loans have been a disaster.
A disaster. I mean, you were right on everything. But again, you're talking about abolishing it. And I had offered to a reform prompt, but you're saying to abolish it. So you want it to just be gone.
Yeah. And the plan that the Trump administration put out was that they were going to move certain functions to other departments where they're more appropriately housed. I like the idea of civil rights-based issues being in the DOJ rather than the DOE, because that's where every other civil rights issue is housed. And it makes more sense. Part of the problem with having things in the DOE to be totally, and I don't want to betray my teacher friends and my former colleagues, but when you have educators make policy, they come from this really passionate, well-intentioned place, and then they do things that just don't make any sense. So, in the context of special education, we have this law called IDEA, and it mandates, through spending, a number of things about how to deal with kids with needs. One of the things it mandates is that kids with needs must be in the least restrictive environment possible. It sounds lovely. It makes you feel really good about yourself. You say, oh my God, yeah, we're not going to have the kids in the room with all the kids with problems. We're going to have them with everybody else. And we're going to feel better about it. The problem with it is it makes it impossible as a former teacher to use tracking. Because normally what you would do is you would track students and you'd say, everyone who reads on this level is in this class, middle, top, honors. You track them and you have them in smaller groups and you're teaching them about exactly where their skill level is. And you're much more successful when you teach this way. But if you put in 10 kids with IEPs into the classroom, they're all going to be in the low tracked class. So then the low tracked class becomes 8 kids with IEPs and 2 poor bastards who are never going to get paid attention to. And those 2 poor bastard kids get stuck in the low classes because they're never going to be the focus of attention because the kids with IEPs have mandated attention. So as a result, either you screw over those 2 kids or tracking becomes impossible and education becomes less efficient. And that's what you're seeing today. More and more, they're abolishing tracking. They're abolishing programs that target. They're saying they're doing it in the name of equity and inclusion, but what they're actually doing is making education less efficient and less targeted, in part to make it more inclusive to kids based off of IDEA. But this is just not working. It's making education worse.
I agree with you 1,000,000%.
Are you sure? Again, are you sure?
But here's the thing. But the prompt is: should we abolish the Department of Education? Abolishing the Department of Education is not going to abolish the law that has created. And again, we are in the minority of teachers who would sit here and bash special education the way I think we're going about to, as we should, because this is something like that. Now I think that I'm an attorney, I feel more comfortable screaming in teachers' faces about this. And I've been teaching so long that I really see exactly what you're saying play out. And I've taught all the levels, like up to really high functioning, like, alternative ed, blah, blah, blah. I think the differentiation has dummied everybody down. Okay, you are right. Tracking the way we were probably educated worked much better. Gender specific education is much better. Girls learning with girls and boys learning with boys is much better for many people. Maybe some people, can mix it up. But in terms of IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disability Education Act, and it says that students need to be, if they need an aide in the classroom, if they need, a special school. I mean, parents take advantage of IDEA all day long. They push school districts to pay for private placements. That's not a federal Department of Education problem. That's a federal law problem, right? The law, that's like, again, a whole nother debate and solution, which is repeal IDEA, put tracking back, stop with this, FAPE, and stop blaming. I mean, I was trained as an education lawyer. I hated doing special education law. As somebody who really knew it, it was so frustrating to be at the table and just go, my God, it's not the teacher's fault, right? Because it blames the teacher, it blames the school. Why this kid's not learning? So let's throw all this money at the kids. But again, it's just, to me, it's not a Department of Education problem. It's, again, a federal law problem. So how is abolishing the Department of Education going to fix the dumbification and the due to what do they call it? Differentiation, right? Mm-hmm. So all the teachers out there will know what I say. You're supposed to differentiate your curriculum and your lessons so that all the kids can be taught in the same room, so that the kids who are like not as smart don't feel bad because they're not as smart, and like everybody's supposed to feel good. And what I would say, if I was a parent of like an average intelligence kid, I would be suing the school. Ryan, I have a lawsuit idea. We need to get with the regular average kids and sue for special education funds, because I really think when you put all this attention and all these resources into the low end of the normal curve, right, it doesn't push up everybody to the high end. If you put all of the resources into the middle of the normal curve, like the average kids, you're going to push everybody up. Pushing everybody on the low end does not push the normal curve up. So I think, again, abolishing the Department of Education is not going to solve these problems that we do agree is happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I agree with you. I think that when you run a successful classroom, your goal is to keep every kid's on their toes, meaning they're a little bit uncomfortable to reach the standard. And the way to do that is to teach to the upper middle of the room, and then differentiate for the kids who need more help or are kind of like just rocket scientists who are streaming ahead. And that's a model that works, but it's not a model that works if you're hamstrung by some of these federal policies. Now, you're right. IDEA is federal law. If you abolish the DOE, it's not going away. But what you can do by moving it is modulate the way it's enacted. Because again, IDEA is binding on the states because they accept federal money. There's strings attached to the money. And the money is being doled out by the DOE, and the DOE implements the regulations. The DOE sets the policy that accompanies and gives character to the law. And for those of you who are lay people, federal law is normally pretty vague. It'll say something in big letters that like every kid with needs should be cared for. And it doesn't actually tell you with enough specificity how to do that. And then the federal agency in charge of the law creates regulations that implement the policy. And that's how the specifics come out. With the DOE, what's happening is that we're having people who are putting their thumb on the scale, and the regs are often too much. The policies are often poorly thought through or one size fits all inappropriately. And by moving like IDEA, for example, to the DOJ, then it becomes a civil rights issue, like any other civil rights issue. There's a law, there's a requirement. Are you meeting it? Are we prosecuting? It doesn't have this emphasis that comes from educators where they say like, and we have this holy mission to make sure that every kid is cared for. And that extra punch is part of the problem, unfortunately, because as you know, you can spend an infinite amount of money on special education without making the education system better, because it can be a black hole. I know New York City better than most places because that's where I taught. And in New York City, the last time they published data, I think was 2022, if I recall correctly. And they spent over $300 million on IDEA litigation, not even implementation.
And that the state had to spend that, the state or the city.
New York City spent over $300 million on IDEA litigation, and then they had to spend another $300 million on settlement and implementation of IDEA lawsuits they lost. And that doesn't even cover the cost of doing IDEA normally. And FYI, New York City sucks at educating special needs kids. They're terrible at it. So they're spending almost $1 billion on just the litigation aspect of it to do a bad job. And the idea that we need to maintain this status quo drives me insane. Like, we absolutely have to shake this up. And the first step to me is to get the bureaucrats out of the policy, move these laws, move these regulations to agencies that are not education focused and are just going to implement the laws as written and start restoring more power to the states.
But if you move it to the Department of Justice, aren't you just going to move bureaucrats to the Department of Justice to implement the laws? I don't know that would solve the problem. The DOJ is just a bunch of wonks and bureaucrats as well.
But they're not ed bureaucrats. Because all the ed bureaucrats are getting fired. That's the important part.
They are.
No. It sounds tongue in cheek, but like Common Core and No Child Left Behind are the kind of bad ideas that only a career ed bureaucrat could come up with. Like they're so bad that you would have to think you're like the genius educator who can like force your shit ideas on the country in order to believe this. Anybody who's like a DOJ lawyer would be like, of course I'm not doing that. It doesn't make any fucking sense.
And I agree with you. And I always say, it's amazing to me how educational policy is made by people who don't teach. But I think that your suggestion would just make it a little bit worse, because what you're saying is like, take it from educational policy wonks who suck to like people who don't know anything about education at all. I just feel like it might suck a little more.
I mean,
if you just give it to like a bunch of like, I guess but even the Office of Civil Rights.
Could it really suck more? Like, I feel like
I know. I mean, like a little more.
I know this is like a tangent, something of a tangent, but I litigated a case. This is post teaching. This is a case I did as a lawyer.
Okay.
And I represented a company that did student loan work. And I swear to God, this is my interaction with the Department of Education. In the 80s, if you were young, you probably don't remember this, but the government was begging companies to make student loans available. It was the hot thing. Everyone was in student loans. It was very popular.
So like banks?
Yeah. So my client did student loan servicing. It's Navient.
Okay.
And they service student loans. And at the time, they saw a regulation that didn't make any sense because the regulations from the DOE never make any sense. And they said, hey, DOE, this regulation that you're posting, as we read it, we're going to make a lot of extra money on this. We get to make a bunch of extra money if we do what you say. Are you sure about that? And the DOE sent out another letter to the industry saying, we're sure about it. Do it. Go ahead. So they made like $20 million. They made all this extra money. Then flash forward in 2020, the Department of Education says, hey, why'd you make that money? We want our money back. We're going to audit you. And my client goes, you told us we could do this. And I swear to God, at a hearing in the Department of Education. The Department of Education took the following position, which, by the way, got them fucking laughed out of district court when we litigated it. But within the Department of Education, they took the head, I think it was the interim head of the Department of Education under Trump 1, I think. He took the position that if we said that to you, our advice was illegal. So you should have known better than to rely on it. Are you out of your fucking minds? Like, these people, these are the people who are writing the policy. I don't trust them. I think that they're lunatics who are just doing however the political wind blows.
Well, I think another problem with the Fed in general, and I've noticed this looking at Homeland Security and looking at, like, have you looked at the America First Foundation?
No,
the America First Legal Foundation. So Stephen Miller started a legal foundation. Just check it out. They have a website. It's pretty comprehensive. But they're really trying to cultivate a panel of conservative lawyers that can deal with education, immigration, parental rights. They have like 5 different issue areas. But when I look at who's on who's on their board, I see it's these serious heavy attorneys who have been in law for 30 years, and they've been in like Homeland Security, what used to be MIGRA, like ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So I think what you're saying about like just in the Fed in general, these lawyers, they stay for so long, or just federal employees stay for so long. They stay through so many different administrations. I believe that in your hearing, the lawyer who was like, well, if we gave you that advice, it was illegal at the time, because it was probably a different administration that was, kissing ass of like the obviously student loan industry. Who knows what favors, what, encouragement they were, getting, or what kickbacks they were getting, or what benefits they thought they were going to get by pushing this, it sounds like a private student loan scheme. And then, fast forward a few administrations later where you have more of a movement, especially if you're talking about under DeVos, that would have been the first Trump administration and Secretary Betsy DeVos. They wanted to start to abolish the Department of Education. And it was just a much different mentality. So like, I think just a general issue in DC with the Fed is that when the administration changes at the federal level, you get a whole different mindset, but some of the career politicians are still there. Like, what are we going to do? Like, they're in limbo, right? And like, I have kind of a funny, not funny story. I don't think it's funny, but people out here might think it's funny. During the first Trump administration, when Betsy DeVos took over at the Department of Education, there was a civil rights department, and there was like one career guy who was in charge of Indian education, and like one career person, I think he was doing migrant education. And I talked to the Indian education guy, and he just said that like they just took all their work away, and that they would go into the office every day, just look at each other. There's just nothing going on.
Well, this is what DC is like, and this is why I don't want them involved. Like, I got to be honest with you. Like, that is the argument. Like, the political wind blows, and suddenly national ed policy changes. And here's why that pisses me off. If I'm going to be like a little bit more.
Not to interrupt, but I want you to include this in your answer. Isn't it the same at the state?
No, it's not. And the reason it's not is, like, I know tons of people who would never cross party lines in a national election. They're going to vote blue. They're going to vote red in a presidential election every time. But they will absolutely cross party lines in a local election. And the reason is they know the people. You're like, yeah, I'm a Republican, but I know Dan. Dan's running for city council. Dan doesn't pay his bar tab. Dan's an asshole. I'm not voting for Dan. The fuck Dan, right? So like, people are much different locally because the local community reflects your values better. You know the people, they know you. The problem federally is that it's all national politics, and national politics really has no place in the classroom. This is why people got so mad during the Biden administration when he used, for those of you who know, there's something called Title IX, which does essentially civil rights in education. And Biden,
Gender.
because any school that doesn't that rejects Title IX guidance loses federal funding. So this, when Biden said, okay, you know what? The definition of sex in sex discrimination cases now includes gender identity. So that means that you can, if you misgender someone on a college campus, that's now a civil rights issue. Well, that pissed off a lot of people because they were like, well, how come you're deciding how we're going to handle this big contentious new issue in our local communities by federal fiat without even passing a law? That seems fucked up to us. It changed due process around SA allegations so that there could be less process and you could be kicked out of school more easily if you were accused of something. And you can think whatever you want about these policies, but the fact that they were pushed down on the country by the federal government without even passing a law is crazy. And if you think I'm being unfair about Biden, flip forward. People are furious now that Trump is wielding federal control over university funding to push his priorities. But we're a very divided country. We're a very divided country. And I don't like a system where 51% of the country votes to beat 49% of the country with sticks every 4 years. It seems like a shitty thing to do to me. And the problem is right now, that's what we're having, where the next administration comes in and suddenly Title IX means that if you misgender somebody, you get kicked out of school. And then the next administration comes in, misgender however you want, doesn't count anymore. And that doesn't seem like a good way to run our education systems, to be honest with you. And I think it's the problem you identified, that DC is dominated by national political issues of the day. And when I think about education, I value continuity. I value my values. I value my community's values. I don't want my kids affected by the national political issue of the day. It seems unfair.
I hear that, but let's go back to the states. Are the states any more consistent? Because I have taught in a few states, as you have taught in New York, which is the biggest. New York City schools is indeed the second largest school district in the country outside of LA Unified, and the largest group of teachers and the second largest teachers union, the New York Federation of Teachers. And we could, I would love to know your thoughts on unions and all of this. Right. Because the union, when I was doing research and was going back, it was like, I just found a lot of support from the NEA, which I hate the NEA, but they were just really pushing like this Department of Education and the history of it and how great it was. So anyway, we could talk about that in a minute. As much as I do love union rights, but teachers unions can be whatever. But are the states really? Let me go back. In my experience, I think states are as frustrating, as confusing, and as fickle as the federal government when it comes to changing policy, curriculum. Locally, we change curriculum all the time. The county is in charge of curriculum. That's always changing. Unless you're like in an international baccalaureate school, an IB school that's internationally regulated and licensed, which does exist in the United States. And actually, that's like a really good point I should bring up, and I will. But yeah, I think the states are as wacky and inconsistent and as frustrating with their policy as the Fed is.
I think that states will do things like, here's the thing. If you leave policy up to the states, you have to be honest and say some states will have great ideas and some states will have terrible ideas. Now, but the difference when it's left up to the states is that we can then observe and see what happens, and that there's room for variety. And what matters about that, and it really does matter quite a bit, is that's how we can start diagnosing these other problems. Like, I actually have a major problem with the way teachers unions, particularly in places like New York, where they're really, really powerful. And the amount of it's crazy. People don't understand the situation in New York City. People say like, oh my God, our schools are so underfunded. We need to put more money in the system. New York City today spends $33,000 a year per student to educate them. You could put your kid in a private school for that money. easily. It's a crazy amount of money. The problem is not money. The problem is that there's this system that's locked into place by unions, by bureaucrats, by contracts, and yes, by the federal government, that ossifies and prevents change and is massively inefficient. In places like Florida, which has had a much better educational record over the last 20 years, what you've seen is experimentation. We're going to try a voucher program. And I have my problems with voucher programs, but we're going to try it. We're going to give charter schools a better shake. In New York City, there was a lot of problems with getting charter schools off the ground. The experimentation works. And the thing about ed is every parent wants the best for their kids. And parents disproportionately vote. Parents will show up and vote. They will go to local government. They'll go to PTA meetings. And I think that when you open the doors up and you let people try new things, you'll see systems that work better. Like I am 100% sure that there's a better way to do special education than IDEA. I don't know that I could articulate it right now. I don't quite know what it is, but I'm willing to bet that if we removed IDEA and let the states try it, a bunch of states would do something worse and a few states would do something better, and then we could all copy them. What I don't like is the idea that we're going to be stuck with the system we have because we're afraid to change it. And the system we have hasn't been around that long and kind of sucks. So I don't see that we should be stuck with it just because it's been around for 50 years.
I think it sucks in some places. I think it doesn't suck in others. But to go back to let's just try it, let's just see what works. Who is going to compile that information, share it, discuss, figure out what works? You know, if there isn't a centralized space or place like the Federal Department of Education to compile what you're saying, you know, best practices. Like one thing, I have to give Florida props. You can hate their crap governor all day long. Free public college. If you get a 3.0 in high school, you are guaranteed a 4-year university education in any Florida public university or college, which I think is amazing. But I mean, we know that's good. Other states haven't copied that, you know, so I'm not sure that your theory of let the states try and we'll see what works, because states have tried things and shit does work and other states don't copy it. They just keep doing their own dumbass shit.
Well, I think if I'm going to be like a realist for a second now and maybe take off my argumentative hat and just be like, let's be honest about what's happening. States that don't experiment typically because their teachers unions are so powerful that you can't experiment. One of the benefits of getting rid of the DOE is it will make that problem more obvious, because right now the boogeyman is often the DOE. But I can tell you for a fact, when I was teaching in New York City, I worked at 2 charter schools, one that had amazing data, one that had terrible data and got shut down because it just was a catastrophic failure of a model. The school that worked really great, its data was off the charts. The kids were doing so much better. Like in the neighborhood, the building, like it was amazing. But we were not copied. We were absolutely not copied by schools in the city. Why? The teachers worked longer hours. I showed up at 7:15 and the kids stayed with me till 4:20. It was a much longer day. We had mandatory summer school for all students. Everybody came to summer school during the middle of the day. These are things you cannot do on a union contract. You just can't. And that isn't a federal issue. That's not a federal issue. The problem is when you try to draw attention to these things, then the teachers throw up their hands and they go, Common Core. Oh my God, Common Core, no child left behind. If only the federal government wasn't telling us what to do. So there's more than one factor for sure. But the problem is everybody points, it's like the Spider-Man meme. Everyone's pointing the finger at somebody else and it ossifies and nothing can change. And that's what's fucked up. Like it's a little hypocritical because I taught in New York City. My wife taught in New York City. We benefited from this. So like I got money out of this program. So, I'm a hypocrite, but
But you worked for Teach for America, which is a different program.
Yeah. And I worked in a charter school, but she was union. My wife was union. And so like when she was union, New York State has this crazy program where when you invest in your retirement account, they guarantee you 7% a year return, even if the market doesn't have 7% a year.
Yeah.
Well, where does that money come from? Taxpayers. So they're saying, so why is it $33,000 a year per student in New York City? Well, a lot of it is paying pensions. A lot of it is paying for these benefits that don't make any sense. So I would love to pick that fight, but you got to pick both fights, right? Like, I don't think that you can meaningfully target state policy until you meaningfully target federal policy.
Okay, I don't think I have any more glaring points to make. I think I've covered all of my reasons why we should at least keep some semblance of a Department of Education.
I mean, but what's funny, and I mean, I'm happy to feel like my position has broad support, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like, you seem very, very critical of the Department of Education for somebody who's arguing in favor of the Department of Education. And I think you're being honest. I think that you've been involved in the system and you know how terrible it is.
Well, I would say I don't know that I'm being, I guess I'm very critical of the Department of Education and some of all of these problems, but I still think it shouldn't be abolished. I still support federal oversight. I certainly support funding for, things that probably everybody does not support: migrant education, CTE, career technical ed, which could be done at the states, but it's not. It's mandated by, at this point, it's mandated by the Fed, and the states pick up their own programs. Maybe the Department of Education just confuses state level services and programs because it just throws more in to the mix. And maybe if it was gone, everything would be more streamlined. But I would say that, I'm still not about abolishing it in any way, in any way, shape, or form. I think we need some way to keep, the country, I guess, to be, for all the educational systems to be unified through the Department.
I think it's really about, if I was going to be,
but it's so political. I mean, it's so political.
Yeah, gun to my head, honest. I'm someone who grew up deep blue, was deep blue my whole life, voted deep blue, then went to law school and suddenly was exposed to like not the caricature of conservative thought, but actual, like, what did Justice Scalia write? What did he think? And went, oh my God, I guess I'm actually not on this team I thought I was on. So I'm a late in life convert to the right. And I can say with some certainty, having grown up in the tri-state area and having been in liberal circles, I think a lot of this is that blue states don't trust red states. They don't trust the people. That's what, honestly, I think when we talk about we need a centralized federal government, they're not saying like, oh my God, are the people in LA and New York City going to live up to their obligations? They're saying, aren't those idiots south of the Mason-Dixon line going to fuck it up if we're not looking over their shoulders? That's what they mean. And I think that's a little fucked up. Like, I have no reason to believe that people in Florida and Georgia care less about their kids or are less incentivized to do a good job on education. I don't buy it. But if you caught me when I was 28, I would have.
Yeah.
Can I ask? Sorry. I was just kind of curious in terms of, because the Department of Education offers federal funding to schools, right? I mean, what if, are states able to break away from that on their own and say, screw you, we're just going to do our own thing, we'll fund ourselves?
They can. It's very, very tricky to do because, like if you think about it politically, you've got to then go to your constituents and say, you're saying, okay, I'm going to turn this down. It's a bad deal. But the person who's running against you in the next election is going to be like, that dummy turned down $3 billion for your kids. Right. So you've got to be in a place where the people are very motivated to resist the federal government, which is why it only happens in places like Texas. Like it's incredibly rare.
And the money is so big that it's a lot for states to make up. And one thing we didn't even mention is that a lot of federal money goes to school construction. And that, and that's something that local taxpayers can pay for through bonds, but it's very hard to get passed. Why would a politician go to the taxpayers, put a proposition on the ballot to get a fifth, my hometown couldn't even pass a 0.01% property tax or something to support the local library. Like the library had to cut hours because the people in my town didn't even want to pay another $50 a year on their property taxes to keep the library open. They were like, we don't use the library. It's downtown. Fuck it, right? Like my kids read at school. So the federal money is just so huge. I mean, my own the district near me lost, I think, $60 million this year that was supposed to build a new school because somebody forgot to sign the grant form to the Fed and it turned it in late and they just lost the money. And so the district had to make up, it was a huge scandal. The district had to make up this like massive amount of money. So school districts could turn away federal money, but to fill the gap that it comes from, it's just federal money is big money. No matter what.
It's packaged in a way that makes it really difficult, right? Like if you think about the money for IDEA, which we've been talking about, the federal government every year they promise to cover 40% of special education costs. They have never done it. They've only covered like 12, 13% on average. And then figuring out what the states are spending on special education is actually very difficult, right? Because like I was trying to tabulate how much does New York City spend on just lawyers? $300 million. How much do they spend on settlements? Another $300 million.
Oh, settlements.
That's not even in the budget for the school. That's a separate line item. So it's very hard to figure out what the real price tag is. And then let's just be real about this. When you're voting on it, the parents of kids who have special needs are going to be super motivated and show up. So politically, it's extraordinarily difficult to turn it down, no matter how bad the deal is. And that's part of the problem. Because often, by the way, just the last point, the deal's not always clear. Like you take the money and then you say, oh, great, we took the money. And then they say, and because you took the money, you have to agree that anyone who says they are a woman is in fact a woman under the law. And you're like, wait a minute. That doesn't seem like what we agreed to. And they're like, Title IX, you're going to give the money back? So like there's a bit of a shell game that gets played. And often you don't realize what the requirement is until it's a little too late.
So is this like a carrot and the stick kind of almost propaganda to a degree? I feel so curious right now with everything you guys are saying. It feels like a carrot and a stick, like the power of the purse. Well, if you want all this money, you got to do it our way, dangle, dangle. But if we remove that, like what you're suggesting, Ryan, then it kind of pushes that power of the purse away. It removes that line item concept and puts it back in the hands. I would maybe just like for every student, we'll give you X amount of dollars in your state or something, right? I mean, or just giving it back to the state to handle on their own. I feel like to some degree, there's a way in which states can utilize this to their advantage to bring the families to their holy shit. Sorry, let me.
Whoa!
Shout out to you. I normally wouldn't interrupt for super chats, but I feel like we're in such a good place right now talking.
Yeah, plus you dropped the hundo. Come on.
Thank you, Tom. He's so sweet. I love my people. But like. I look at it this way. If we decentralize, remove the federal government and allow the states to take more control over their education system, would that then incentivize families who have children or who are going to have children to say, let's move to the state with the best school system?
Yeah, people will absolutely vote with their feet. Not everybody can. But some people absolutely will. And then the other thing it will do, and we didn't get into this because this is a little bit more of like a economics point than a law and education point. But one of the problems the DOE has is it's so inefficient And it creates these systems that are so expensive, but don't actually do a good job with education, that it's falsely creating the impression that education costs this extravagant, astronomical number that it doesn't actually cost. So when you add all this bureaucratic waste into the equation, suddenly people say, my God, in New York, how could you possibly educate a kid for only $33,000 a year? And in fact, next year it's estimated to be $36,000 a year. Like, it's, you know what I mean? And
if you can't, with the government, if you don't use the money they provide, they'll strip you of it the next year too. Like,
but it just like the numbers just keep getting bigger because the system's so inefficient. And that actually is really stifling, because if you wanted to come up with another solution, if you wanted to do something on the state level, you might think, oh my God, I need to come up with $33,000 a kid. You do not need $33,000 a kid.
Right.
This is a crazy number that's invented by bloated bureaucracy. And if we got rid of some of that bureaucracy, the number would go way the fuck down.
So another kind of question, the only thing I could see that is a bonus or a pro in terms of the keeping the centralized, keeping the DOE. Because I mean, I am a child of this very situation where I was in the middle of, I think, 7th or 8th grade. Parents moved me all the way out to the Midwest from the East Coast, two completely different worlds. Maryland and Missouri, they operate entirely different. And things that I started learning in Missouri was very different from Maryland. For like, there was completely different programs and different thought processes, especially in the English grammar and so on and so forth. Would having the DOE ensure, at least because you have especially if you're in high school and you move mid-year or you move in the middle of your high school year, you have all of these credits and these things that you need to, does that federal program keep things kind of on the same level if you're going interstate levels as a student?
Well, I have a snarky response, but I'll let lawyer LC take a stab at this one.
Yeah. Well, I was going to probably give a not snarky but factual response. That was the goal of Common Core, which was like, if everybody's learning the same thing, then if they move from Virginia to Wisconsin, they'll be learning the same thing. And it's also what a lot of charter schools do, in that they force teachers to be teaching the same thing on the same day, so that in theory, if you go into a classroom on Monday in one part of town, and then you move across New York to a different charter school, same charter, they're going to be on the same curriculum on Friday that you would have been on. But teaching doesn't work like that. And I think teaching is a very creative endeavor. I think most teachers work very hard. They're really good at what they do. They're really passionate about what they do. And it takes a lot of individualization and also creativity to teach well. And so things like Common Core just get in the way. So I don't know that the Department of Education would control or unify curriculum, but I'm going to let Ryan talk and then answer that too.
My snarky response is the DOE existed when you had that exact problem, and the DOE did not solve it.
Common Core did not solve it, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, I didn't have Common Core came with my children, but I didn't have
Common Core
it.
came later, and it somehow made the situation worse.
Yeah, it was supposed to do, though, to solve the problem that you had, which was like, you moved from Maryland, you went, well, we can solve that where every kid is learning and we can all be like Chinese children.
Well, but here's the thing, and here's the issue. Like, just to be as as culture war focused as possible for a second. A few years ago, we were embroiled in a national debate about whether our country was founded in 1776 or 1619. Right? That was a legitimate conversation we were having. Now, I think it's a dumb conversation, but it was one we were having. Now, let's say that Common Core was the law of the land and every school has to teach Common Core, right? Well, what if 1619 becomes very popular with DC bureaucrats that year? Now suddenly that's the Common Core.
Well, I think we're already having that issue anyways, with history books being written with very biased authors and so on and so forth. So we're already seeing that issue.
But what people mistake is they say like, oh my God, it's so terrible. this state's teaching this way. The solution is we at the federal level should cram down and tell them all to do it our way, right? And that will never work, because then the other party takes power and they just switch it back and forth. And as divided as we are, Common Core is a recipe for turning our education system into a partisan battleground. And we are not sufficiently unified for this to work. Like, we really do have different values in different parts of the country, and it makes a lot more sense for people to teach their values to their kids than to be told what values they must teach their kids by bureaucrats in DC. It's just a crazy thing to think would work in the country at this moment.
Now, what about homeschooling? Do you think the federal government having this centralized program, and then the schools are just public things and you just do it, you get along with the program and you send your kids, life's good, move on? Do you think if we removed the federal portion of it, kind of took away a lot of the, like making it just such a public thing to do, like sheep style, do you think more parents would take back that role and do more homeschooling?
It's interesting.
I ask that because I think at the end of the day, that might be the better solution for everyone, right? Because this way parents can control what their kids are learning. Parents can control what they're doing. But then, we still have, what are the credentials and what are you meeting? But at the end of the day, like, we lose a lot of the special education issues that Lawyerchick was talking about. We don't have to worry about all this funding crap because you're at home, right? Your mom's making you lunch. Your mom's got the same books that pass along between you and your brothers and sisters. Like, you're operating under the same guys, but from within your home, you're paying your own utilities. You're not housing a bunch of students, worrying about AC, busing, chaperones, janitors, all of these things.
Yeah.
I mean, we just kicked it back, because I feel like in to some degree, when the and I'll say it this way, when the government took over public schooling and the government kind of made it to where they're just kind of pacifying it, we don't have a reason to strive for it on our own. We don't have the need to do it because, hey, daddy's doing it for us, right?
One of the crazy things, I've talked to a bunch of homeschool parents recently, which is something I didn't used to do. I didn't know any, but now I do. The craziest thing I've learned is how little time they spend on teaching to get the same results. Most of them work on ed for about 2 hours a day, and their kids are above grade level. And the obvious answer that I think all of us know, if we're being honest with ourselves, is that schools in terms of the breakdown of the day, most of the time your kid spent in school is a daycare function at best, right? And maybe they have some stuff they do during the daycare portion. They might play a trumpet or something, but it's a daycare function. And that's really what you're paying for. That's what, and that's the expensive part. And this is, the result of government bureaucracy. Like, it's kind of, one way of looking at it is, when we give SNAP benefits, the government doesn't make the food and hand it out, because we know how bad the government would be at making the food and handing it out. We know they can't be trusted. And yet we think that they're going to be able to do the educational work. They're just not good at it is the problem. So one of the needs to kind of break this inefficient bureaucracy is to make the price point go down. And when the price point goes down, market solutions become more tenable. Like, if you could get
explain that. Go unpack that a little more. What do you mean?
Well, I think right now school's really expensive for kind of dumb reasons. It's money's tied up in teachers' pensions. It's tied up in unions. It's tied up.
Is a teacher pension really such a bad thing, though?
Well, it depends how expensive it is. Like I said, I've got money coming to my family from one of these, so I'm not complaining. I know I'm in a glass house, but a lot of these things are insane. Like the idea that my wife and I could contribute to a fund that guaranteed a 7% return. Imagine during 2021, when the market was crashing, we were getting 7% returns on our investments. Everyone else is losing money. This is very expensive stuff. It's very expensive to have these curriculums that are distributed by the superintendent and various districts. It's very expensive to do IDEA litigation.
Yeah,
it's very expensive.
yes.
These are very expensive things, and kind of artificially so.
War is very expensive. Teachers' pensions are not very expensive. Let's just, I mean, what is very expensive to you? Because I think that if you look at the 4% federal budget, that is the Department of Education, and the, defense budget, Department of Defense budget, that's what, 10 times more than that, almost $1 trillion, I think, 890 billion last year. The Department of Education is a fraction of that. So I don't know. I think I see where you're going with it. Teachers' benefits are expensive. School buildings are expensive. Sure. But yeah, I think that the government also spends ridiculous amounts of money on lots of other things in ridiculous proportions. And I'm also just a complete, what if we took 5% of the Department of Defense budget and pushed it into education? And then we wouldn't be having, this conversation of teachers are taking all the money. That's where
I don't think
don't agree.
I don't think funding's the problem. I honestly, New York City, like I was saying, $33,000 a year per student is so much money.
Well, but let's
crazy amount of money.
That too. That's not because of federal bureaucracy. The states have ridiculous bureaucracies as well.
Yeah.
So if we're going to give it to the state, like I was teaching in California, living in California, and I was working with the California Federation of Teachers for years, out of the classroom, in the classroom. And there are school districts in California that is I don't know if other states have this, but there will be one elementary school, one middle school, one high school in the middle of the Central Valley, a superintendent who is paid $210,000 for these 3 schools. And then, 45 minutes away, there's another tiny school district that's rural with 3 schools, and another superintendent and associate superintendents. And, even in where I used to work in California, the superintendent just gave herself, and the school board approved it, right? So when we bring local control, yes, it makes sense, and the parents care, but you also bring local corruption, because you have a school board that just approved, a $15,000 bonus or bonus for the superintendent at the same meeting that they approved preemptive layoffs. I've never worked in a district that was approving layoffs in, what month are we in? November. You don't have to the budget doesn't even get rectified till February. So, they're already saying, we want the power to lay off all these people. Superintendent, here's more money for you. And we don't really even need to decide or figure out who's being laid off until March, but we want to preemptively do it. And it wasn't just teachers, it was counselors. And, they were really going to take a chunk out of what you call the very expensive benefits and pay for the school employees. So, and I guess also fundamentally, I'll finish with this. I don't mind the federal government being somewhat of a jobs program for people. That doesn't bother me. My federal taxes, I'd much rather have my federal taxes employ my neighbors and teachers and, at least pay pensions than send, however many billions of dollars we spend to Ukraine, the small hats, all of that. So
I guess my thing about that is I'm with you to the extent you're saying fixing education is not as simple as removing the DOE. I agree with you. I think maybe a way to summarize my point would be you've got bad systems locally. You got bad systems in many states at the state level. Some states are better than others. You've got teachers' unions that are often running contrary to the interests of students. And then you've got the federal bureaucracy sitting on top of it. Most of those things don't work particularly well. And that's why our education system sucks so bad. I just think that if we remove one of those inefficient, terrible things, we'd be better off than if we kept it. So, I don't think it's going to be a panacea. I think we'd have a lot of work to do. But, it's hard for me to think because local government bureaucracies are stagnant, inefficient, we should tack on a federal government bureaucracy that's stagnant, inefficient, and is pushing culture war stuff. It seems like we're making the problem worse, not better.
I hear you. And, homeschool is all over the place. I'm actually an advocate for homeschool. I don't really mind when people homeschool their kids, but I've also seen some very questionable homeschooling and children. I mean, and maybe this was just like a hippie Northern California thing, but in California, I saw kids. We had a kid come to school with, like, he'd never worn shoes. His mom told us he was doing physics. He was 8 and he did not know the alphabet, and he'd been homeschooled. So not all homeschool is created equal. I do want to give a shout out though for Rand Paul's homeschool curriculum. If anybody, he has a good one. It is really neat. So shout out Rand Paul homeschool curriculum. I forget what it's called. Go to the Liberty Report website. I do not get paid to endorse that, but there is some, there are some okay homeschool things. And I don't think it's a terrible option, but back to the cost of schools. I mean, Ron Paul. Yes, Rand is the son. Thank you, John Philax, wherever you are. So yes, it's Ron Paul's homeschool curriculum, and Rand is his son, who I also respect. But don't you think it's just running a school system, the power, the buildings, don't we want people to have those good jobs? Like, I don't mind custodians having good jobs, retiring after 30 years, living in the community, putting their kids through college. I mean, I think those good jobs is what created our generation, of educated, middle class, upper middle class, whatever people. And I'm afraid for, folks in their 30s and 40s now that they don't have these types of benefits, and where they might be in, the next 20, 30 years without, 1099 contractors. I represent a lot of them. No pension, no savings, what's going to happen? And then if Social Security blows. So I don't, again, I guess back to, I don't mind the federal government being somewhat of an economic stability, having an economic stability function for Americans.
The problem I have with it is that when you talk about these good jobs, the good jobs that are created by federal spending are by and large not teachers. Like, what are we really talking about? We're talking about the growth of the bureaucratic class within education. And we've seen this across the board, like with student loans going into colleges is actually the best example. As colleges got access to infinite money because they could charge whatever they wanted for tuition, we put generations of our children into debt slavery to go to universities where they were barely taught anything. And where was the money going at the universities? It was going to administrators. In a lot of these schools, they have an administrator for every 5 students. Like, it's this crazy, unnecessary bloat. And you see the same thing. And a lot of these people are well-intentioned. They mean well. I'm not saying they're bad people. But when I was teaching, you saw this all the time, even at like a K-12 level, where you have to have the coordinator, and the coordinator's there for the IDEA program. And the IDEA program has all the special ed teachers under it. And then you've got to have meetings, and it creates this whole infrastructure around it, which serves very, very few kids. And quite frankly, is vulnerable to manipulation. Like, this is a tangent, but there's one year I had a parent, obviously I can't name names, but she, every day she would come up to me and be like, my daughter has autism. And I was like, she absolutely does not have autism. And you're like, no, get her tested. I was like, I don't need to get her tested. I've been teaching a while. I know what autism is. Your daughter is like super high functioning, smart, socialized, lots of friends. She does not have autism. And the reason she wanted her daughter diagnosed with autism is A, it was kind of trendy to have a kid with Asperger's back then, but B, it's weird, she wanted the benefits. She wanted to have extra time. She wanted to have extra resources for her kid, free tutoring, all this stuff that would come with it. She was gaming the system a little bit. And God bless her, it's her kid. I'm not gonna say she's wrong for trying, but the incentive structure is deeply fucked up. And that's why we have all these kids on, ADHD medication, because they, you get extra time on tests. Isn't that great? Like we incentivize disability in the way our system currently operates, which is a tremendous disservice to a lot of kids beyond being very expensive and inefficient. And I'm not convinced it's actually made special education even better for the kids it's supposed to be servicing. I think it's made it more social, but I don't know that it's made her a better education system. So these aren't layers of bureaucracy I'm attached to. I would like to see these shaken up.
I can see that.
Would we want to, I know this is felt more like a conversation. I feel it was very productive, actually. I love it. I love that you guys had agreement points and also disagreement points. But if you want, since I know you both are a little on the time variable for early bedtimes, do you want to go ahead and move into closing statements, and then we'll maneuver into open panel and maybe we can take some questions?
Totally fine with me. I think we reached a natural transition point. If it's okay with you.
Yeah, it's such a good conversation. I'm so intrigued. All right, Lawyerchick, I will leave the floor open to you for your closing statement, please.
Okay, my closing statement will be brief. I do not think we need to abolish the Department of Education 100%. I think the problems that we identified in the federal Department of Education, huge bureaucracy, policy wonks at the top making decisions, are the same. Corruption in terms of political appointments like the Secretary of Education. Why is the World Wrestling Federation's ex-wife, is she the ex-wife or the current wife? Why is she even the Secretary of Education? I mean, Betsy DeVos was at least a reasonable choice because she was passionate about charter schools. I'll give her that, even though she sucked and was horrible as doing the job. But I think if we abolish the Department of Education because of bureaucracy, because of inflated spending, because of, inefficient functioning, the states have the same problem. So I don't know that abolishing the Department of Ed would be the solution. I think we still need some kind of central, mechanism to oversee educational programs for our most vulnerable students, for migrant education, for students living below the poverty line, for career technical education programs, homeless students. Definitely have lots of federal rights and oversight that comes through the Department of Education. While we definitely agree that the student loans do need restructuring, I would agree they don't necessarily need to be housed in the Department of Education, and the Department of Education does outsource a lot of that anyway. But I think that overall, I don't mind the federal government existing. I don't mind it existing as some kind of jobs program. And I think that the solution to a lot of the problems in the Department of Education or with federal education isn't abolishing the Department of Education. It's abolishing or severely reforming, like doing away with almost some of the laws that are at the federal level, like special education, IDEA, and some other funding streams, maybe even for, everybody will love this, learners of English, students who are learning English as a second language, which we didn't really talk about, but that's another student population that gets a lot of federal funding. They're called ELD or ESOL, like English as a second language students. So those are students whose English is not their first language. They're also often, usually immigrant students. They get a big chunk of money for those programs, and it can be as expensive as special ed in some spaces. So I, again, don't think we should abolish the Department of Ed. I think the same problems will exist no matter what. And we do need some kind of central federal space to manage this brilliant country that we are trying to hold on to. Keep it brilliant. Make America brilliant again. That should be our, I'm going to make that on my name.
Fair enough. Thank you, Lawyerchick. And Ryan, to you, please.
I agree that this was turned into more of a discussion than a debate, which I'm totally happy about. I like having productive conversations. I like meeting new people. I like sharing ideas. Very glad to have it. But to put on my debate hat just because it's that time, right? Let's just run through some of the points of agreement that we've had in this conversation. The Department of Education is responsible for the student loan program. Unmitigated disaster. Total agreement. The Department of Education was responsible for Common Core. Unmitigated disaster. Total agreement. It was responsible for No Child Left Behind. Unmitigated disaster. Total agreement. It's responsible not for the IDEA law, but for the implementation of IDEA policy. Unmitigated disaster. Total agreement. It spends $4 billion on itself, at least it did till Trump fired half of them, every year to educate no children. And it has become increasingly a vehicle for the culture wars to spread into our classrooms through DC policy, which we've seen happen in both the Biden and Trump administrations. And it makes people upset. It makes parents upset. It's bloated, it's inefficient, and quite frankly, it doesn't work. And if you look at the systems that it promotes, they have been terrible. They've led to bad outcomes for children. And again, I'll go back to the stat I started this debate with. Since we implemented the DOE, our average spend per student has nearly tripled. Our test scores have flatlined. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't make things better, but it does make things more expensive. It does make things more bureaucratic, and it does create the risk that one day you're going to wake up and find out that now the country was founded in 1619 and there's 37 genders. And then the next year it was founded in 1776 again and there's 2. And that probably aren't the kind of thing that should change every 4 years when a new president is elected. That's probably the side of thing that shouldn't be determined by national politics and who you vote for. That's the sort of thing that should be determined by people in their communities caring for their children. And I think ultimately, if you look at the DOE's track record and you just look and take a fair look at some of its greatest hits and say, what do teachers think about Common Core? What did parents think about No Child Left Behind? Did No Child Left Behind actually make our students better educated? The answer is no, because these policy wonks don't know what the fuck they're doing. That's the honest truth. And the best part about abolishing the DOE is that to the extent these programs survive, they would be managed by non-educators. They'd be managed by people who are not trying to push some novel education theory. They're just trying to figure out what states need the money because they have disadvantaged kids. And that's a math problem. That can be solved by data. It doesn't require an education degree to figure it out. And I think we'd all be better off as a result. But in any event, it was a very productive conversation. I appreciate Lawyerchick. It's nice to have a debate where, God bless Pisco, but last time I was on here, he got a little fired up from time to time. So it's nice to be collaborative. But I think that if you have a fair assessment, you look at the Trump plan to abolish the DOE, not through a partisan lens, but just through its own track record, you'll find that it's not as crazy a plan as you might think it is if you're coming to it from a lefty perspective.
Okay. Yeah, my last debate was with Speakeasy. So this is like a breath of fresh air. And sunshine and rainbows and unicorns.
I try to explain this to people because sometimes I do get nasty in these public debates, but I really do try to keep these very civil and above the belt as much as I can. I'm not above fighting back, but I certainly have had some clips where I get mean, but I would much prefer to have this kind of conversation than that kind of conversation if given the opportunity.
That's true.
I'm panel-verse adjacent.
Yeah.
See, everyone knows what the panel verse is when we say panel verse. Everybody gets it. Shout out. Also, if you would like to be part of the conversation, I currently have 4 backstage hanging out. If you want to join in to push back or agree or whatever you want to do. I know I've got probably one of each side coming in behind backstage right now. So I'm interested to see which direction it goes. But feel free to hit the link. It is officially in the chat. If you're watching over on Ryan's end or Lawyerchick's end, they're welcome to drop the StreamYard link on their ends or just come over here and find it at the Raging Tomato. We got you. Kinetic Kel says, I'm broke. Someone help, please. Yes. Kinetic Kel officially hitting off the first dono goal of the evening. But we love our little Kel. She's our darling. Thank you so kindly. Screaming Beagle following the trend to send in another 10 to hit the goal. Thank you so kindly. And of course, Tom Carpenter stepping in with my favorite color to put on screen. Shout out to you. And I hope everyone sent tomatoes along the way Thank you. And Tom follows up with another 20 to say, no need for a Department of Education, just need funds management with simple rules for access to funds. Let local boards controlled by local communities do their jobs. You were clapping, Ryan. I think this was very in line with a degree of what you were saying earlier.
He gives you big money. He agrees with my talking points. Carpenter Tom and me are clearly friends. This is going to work out, Carpenter. You're a good guy.
Lawyerchick, did you have any thoughts to add into that or disagree, agree?
Yeah, actually, I'm just posting a Mark Twain quote that I could not remember. The famous Mark Twain quote about school boards is, in the first place, God made idiots. That was made for practice. Then he made school boards. Have you ever heard that? So like local school boards, I'm telling you, I've worked, those are some real locally, yokely, it could go either way. You know, my friend in Texas just had a 10 Commandments donated to her classroom.
But you know what? Texas did have the common sense to reject Common Core. So, you know,
and they rewrote all of their textbooks, right?
But I think that I'd have to run down the numbers again because I don't have them written down. But I'm pretty sure that their data has been better than Common Core's data has been on average. Now, that's kind of a low bar because Common Core is such a disastrous program that if they spent an hour a day on the 10 Commandments and then like 7 hours a day doing something rational in their education system, they would easily beat Common Core. So yeah, that might not be a ringing endorsement, but I think it's I would be unsurprised if they topped it just because of how bad that rollout's been.
Fair enough. Tom adds in again, I don't know, that government cheese in the 70s was pretty good. I don't know what the government cheese in the 70s was. Is that like Cheese Whiz or something? What are we talking about?
The yellow.
That's good old American.
Cheese.
Yeah.
Yellow welfare cheese.
If you're getting government government food, like it's I don't know, and reservations they call them just rations. Or commodities. That's what they call them on the res. Commodities, government cheese. It's the yellow square. It's like yellow square American cheese. But it's a big ass block of it. I think that's what you're talking about, Carpenter Tom.
Yeah, there's I can never pronounce it right. What is it called? Budae jjigae. It's a Korean stew. And it's hilarious because it was created during the Korean War when our rations were being dumped into Korea. So it's a Korean stew that has like Spam and American cheese in it. So that's what I always think of when you do government cheese. It's actually weirdly good, but it's a Korean recipe based off of American military rations and good old 70s government cheese.
Yeah. That sounds nasty.
It is what it is. But yeah, huge block of cheese.
It's actually pretty good.
Ooh, YTC sending love just for me to tell all of you I love you. Thanks for watching. And finally, my mom is in the chat and she said huge block of cheese. So I guess she knows what you're talking about as well.
I love that your mom is Mama Tomato.
Yeah, Mama Tomato, and then Dad. I don't see Dad in the chat yet, but Grumpy Tomato is my father. But yeah, huge fans of mine. They love.
They should be very proud of you.
They are. They really are.
That's so cool.
Like what kid calls their parents and says, "So I'm a YouTuber," and they're like, "That sounds great." Like, no, mine are just so ecstatic about it.
I love it
for sure. And then Carpenter Tom Carpenter follows up with my second favorite color to put on screen. Thank you so kindly. We missed you, Tom. I hope you're feeling much better and on the mend. Says the number one reason our education system sucks is because they have as their primary focus something other than proper education. A quick perusal of major K through 12 journals makes this obvious.
He is dead right. I didn't deep dive this because it's a little bit beyond our topic of the debate. This has more to do with teacher education training. And I will say teacher education training is a goddamn joke. Like you have no idea how easy it is and how ideologically based it is. Like, and to give you this example, I was in law school, I did really well. But before law school, I kind of didn't care about school. And when I was an undergrad, I was a very indifferent student. And by indifferent, I mean I rarely attended classes. And I think I had like a 3 something, but I had a 4.0 in my ed minor because all you had to do was show up and repeat the buzzwords and you got an A. Like it's a joke. And most of it is not about teaching you how to teach, but teaching you what to value. And that's a huge mistake, especially because one of the things we teach people to value now is the idea that every kid should go to college, which has never been true and fed our student loan debt, cheapened our collegiate institutions, and hollowed out our blue collar workers who we don't have a program like my sister lives in Germany and they have a system where kids are tracked and not everybody goes to college. A lot of kids are directed into the trades because they're going to have a better, more productive life. And it's not stigmatized the same way it is here. We don't need that system, but we need some other system. And Carpenter's right. Our system right now is, I think, charitably could be described as ideologically based rather than outcome based. And that's a problem.
Do you think it's because people that go into education tend to be already of that ideology?
I think that's part of it. I think it's a giant echo chamber. I think which is another issue with it. Like, I don't like when you were teaching, I ask this to teachers all the time. One thing I was told was that about IDEA, for example, was that inclusive teaching had no drawbacks. It was better for the kids who were included. It was better for the kids who aren't special ed. It was better for everybody. And there was no drawbacks to it, which doesn't really make any sense if you take a second to think about it. Like any system has trade-offs and drawbacks. But know what's interesting about that? No one ever presented me with any data. It was just a thing I was taught to believe. It was not a thing that they presented data to make a case for, which is odd.
Yeah, but I think they presented it because it's like, this is the law and this is what you have to implement.
Yeah.
That's the way I recall it. And but even in law school, I mean, I did a whole lot in the special ed world and clinic. And I did a lot of work with education of incarcerated kids. That's really one of my jams. But I think the issue, isn't like, well, you could teach special ed this way and it'll work better. Right. There was never really a conversation about like how to teach them the best. It was just like, this is how you're mandated to teach because of the law. And now, right, 20 years out and you had 7, now I can see, my God, I think all of this like differentiation and putting all the kids in the same room. And like, I think way earlier in the comments, somebody had said, some classrooms, 1/3 of those kids will have individual education plans, IEPs. And, you might have one kid with an aide and one kid with an interpreter, like somebody who's hearing impaired and the interpreter. Like teachers have to deal sometimes with like 2 or 3 other adults in the room because of their special education students and what those kids need. So that gets expensive. Like that's where the shit gets really expensive. I don't know that it's necessarily just general education is so expensive. It's when you add up all of this other stuff. But I think we're very unpopular in being educators who are just publicly, and I want to do more public denouncing of IDEA. I've been talking about it really more like this publicly for like a year. And now I'm even talking more to teachers about it. Cause I'm like, this is done. And teachers, it's like, you can almost see they're like freed. It's like freedom for them to think that maybe this isn't the right way to do this. Maybe this is like oppressive and maybe average kids who could have been pushed up are not being pushed up because you have to spend all of this time, right? Yeah. Finishing the paperwork and dealing with the 3, aides in your room. And, one is like sitting in the back, not even doing what they're supposed to do. I mean, I think most people realize how much teachers do have to deal with, whether they're a shitty teacher or not.
Yeah. I mean, back when I got my master's in education, like the phrase back then this was before DEI. So the phrase inclusive wasn't it just hadn't been coined
Inclusion
yet.
And mainstreamed.
Back then, the mantra was everybody gets to play and learn, which sounds very innocuous, but it actually is exactly what you're talking about, which is the idea of that we're going to do mainstreaming, right? And that's the value system that justifies mainstreaming rather than it being data about why mainstreaming is such a good program, right?
Yeah, there's no data.
It was not taught that way. And then that became inclusivity, and that became like a string of other buzzwords. But I think Carpenter's right. Like, I think that the focus in teacher training is often on believing certain values, and that's not great. It really should be on other things. And the truth is, a lot of teachers leave teacher training and they're not very good. Like, I was in Teach for America, and if for those of you who don't know, that meant that, like, with no training before I got my ed degree, we're given a 6-week boot camp and thrown into classrooms, and by the numbers outperform veteran teachers.
That is the best way to learn.
Yeah, and the reason is our entire training was about practical ed, and it was a lot of kids who were really motivated to do really well, and that's it, right? And it's just so much of what teachers learn and what they're told to do has nothing to do with educating kids, and that's a problem.
What about, do you remember Gifted Talented? I mean, I was always gifted talented.
Me too.
Whatever happened with that?
Equity happened.
We were split. I remember being split, and it was always like, you're in the dumb class, right? I'm in the smart class, right? Like, I remember that, and I always thought it worked well, at least from my perspective as a student. We like kind of moved a little faster through what we were doing. I used to get bored a lot in classes, so I was given like extra things I could do, because you would finish up and you're like, I'm done. Well, now what? And then that's when they realize, let's move you up into another class. But why don't we do it that way anymore? It's two things. It's the thing we talked about. If you're tracking with modern IDEA regulations, the special class is what you're describing, but the bottom classes are now hellish nightmares of behavior problems, because you're concentrating, like when you went to school, all the kids with really serious disabilities and really serious behavior problems were in a separate classroom. Yeah. Right?
Self-contained
But
classroom.
now they're all in the lower 2 tracked classrooms. So when you track, you take all the kids out who are useful, and you create these zones that no teacher wants to teach, and they become really, really hard to manage. So that's problem A. And then problem B, though this is beyond the scope of our debate, is in a lot of places like New York, San Francisco, et cetera, people point out that when you track, it creates equity problems. So a lot of the movement to abolish tracking programs is that, and I find this, quite frankly, quite racist when people say things like this, but they'll be like, there's just too many Asian kids in the high group, right? Like, isn't it unfair that but they're all the smart ones. That's why they're right. They test in. Yeah. Well, yes, Sarah, that implies that you care more about their merits and their achievements than the racial makeup of the classroom. But that is the argument, right? Like, this happens in New York every year. Oh my God, does this track in with everyone needs a fucking trophy now? Yep.
1,000,000%. That's exactly what this is.
Yep.
That's exactly the participation trophy. We can't yell at the kids, or they can't learn to, they should never be punished. I mean, Seattle, I don't know if it was like the Seattle Unified School District, but they did away with their gifted and talented programs. And I'm going to tell if there's any lawyers that can hear me, the way you can advocate for gifted and talented, because I'm really about that. I think there should be way more of that. Like these average kids we're talking about, like if you've been left in that class, like bored, usually boredom is a sign of a very intelligent student, and they're just bored because they finished the work, exactly what you're saying. If they're in a class with everybody else, then they're just getting either nothing because the teacher's paying attention to all of this other chaos and the adults in the room and all this, whatever. But call gifted and talented the other special ed.
Yeah,
it's the other special ed. I would love to do. This is literally why I'm looking at the America First Foundation. As much as Stephen Miller's a douchebag, I literally want to work with him and do something on this exact. I want to figure out a way to litigate out special education and litigate in more GT. But when Seattle, I'll finish with this. When Seattle canceled their GT programs because they they said it was equity, but it was also a race issue. There were Black parents who were like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, my kid loves this program. Like, hello, Black parent here. My kids are in this program. You're killing it. So I don't know what ended up happening, but it's just dumbing down everything. And yes, it's the trophy. Everybody gets a trophy.
Yeah. And this is the trend you've seen nationally. Whenever a school district starts talking a lot about DEI, equity, inclusion, the track and the gifted and talented programs are put on the chopping block. It definitely happened in Seattle. I think it happened in Portland. I think it happened in San Francisco. In New York, it almost happened a few years ago. I think with the new mayor, it probably will happen in the next couple of years. These programs are constantly on the chopping block because the truth is, they're not going to be racially balanced in the way that like the demographics of the country look. They're just not going to be. And that's viewed as inherently a problem. And I don't think that's fair to the kids, because what you're really saying is that like you kid who are working, like in New York, when they were trying to eliminate it, they put out this policy paper, which had, I thought, the most insulting line I've ever seen in a political document, where they were explaining the rationales for eliminating gifted talented programs. And one of the things they said was a lot of white students often have disproportionate resources and tutors and blah, blah, blah. And that's why they're overrepresented. But then they had to admit New York's Asian population is actually economically disadvantaged. So why are their kids overrepresented in gifted and talented programs? And the answer was because Asian parents are willing to work extra shifts and spend all their personal spending money to get their kids into tutoring programs after school that they can't afford. And they would like to abolish the program to relieve the Asian parents of that burden.
Damn.
What the fuck? Like, can you imagine how patronizing that would be if you were one of those parents where you're like, I'm working 3 jobs to make sure my kid is in the best possible school and is going to go to Harvard. And you're saying you want to take that away from me for my own good? Like, get fucked. Like that, you know what I mean? Like, that's an unbelievably fucked up thing to say to a parent. So, you know, I think this is the sort of thing that makes people angry.
Oh, well, I am interested to see what the panel has to say. I've got a lovely 4 back there, and I know they all are going to bring excellent points up to us. So let me go ahead and get us into panel mode, and let's have some fun. Here we go. All right. I'm so excited. I know which way Josh is probably going to swing. I know which way Ryan's going to swing. Sasquatch, I think you hate the government. Clay probably hates the government. So I'd be interested to see which direction they go. However, I have officially opened up the gauntlet. So if you're watching over on the Raging Tomato side, please feel free to head on over to that side. If not, I'm going to drop the link in the chat here momentarily and set up the raid. We'll be heading over in that direction in 2 minutes, and Raging Tomato will shut down. All right, Joshua, you were waiting so patiently back there, first in line. So if you have something you want to kick in here, go for it.
Can I make one pitch before Joshua?
No, you cannot.
I'm so sorry.
You can talk when I'm done. You're welcome.
All right. Fine, Joshua.
So, Lawyerchick, question for you.
What?
Of all of the arguments you could make, so I didn't hear the whole thing. I heard one argument where I went, holy Jesus, this is a bad argument. This is the argument of someone. So why are you justifying DOE as a fucking jobs program? That's like the most offensive use of tax dollars. You're saying we need to create because we need janitors? That's fucking stupid. By the way, I want to point something out because I might be misconstrued as being too harsh. The way I show respect is by engaging with people's arguments. Not everybody feels the same way. All right, Ryan, you're allowed to speak now.
Good Ryan or bad
Ask
Ryan?
me a question. I'll respecting me.
Yeah. I'll give Elsie time to come up with her brilliant response. My pitch, to the extent I said anything that you find interesting or you think you fucking hate me and you just want to tell me what an asshole I am, my baby YouTube channel is like 90 subs away from monetization. So come by, tell me how smart or what an idiot I am, and I'd certainly appreciate it. And with that, Elsie, I leave you to give your biting rebuttal.
Congratulations on that. Yeah, when I say jobs program, I don't mean everybody gets a job like Cuba style, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I don't mind that my federal tax dollars go to employ fellow Americans. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah,
and I don't mind, wait, let me finish. I don't mind that they're good jobs. I don't mind that they come with benefits. I don't mind that they come with a pension. I don't mind that they have health insurance. I don't mind that it's a livable fucking wage. Like, why should I be mad? You know, we all pay, look at your federal taxes. You pay like 30% of your, tax dollars. I'd rather have that go to parks, and to employ my neighbors who are going to put money back into whatever economy. And also I'd rather have these jobs be in my local schools, in my local, government, wherever it's funded. That's just my opinion. So again, I'm not talking about like a communist style jobs program where it's like, just line up and get a job no matter what you're qualified for. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I don't mind the federal government employing lots and lots of people and, that my taxes subsidize that. It doesn't bother me. What do you want your tax dollars to
I do. Why the hell should we pay people just because we say, no, that's where it's a jobs program. So you're saying it's a baby jobs program. So it's for the janitors. It's okay. The first year I ever made real money. Now, I grew up making $4.75 an hour at my first job doing manual labor. Gives you an idea how old I am. It was legal at the time. I wrote a check for $53,000 to the IRS the first year I made money. I love this country. Glad to pay my taxes. But people who say, let's just spend tax dollars because I just assume spend them and other logics, you're making these moral arguments about why this is good spending versus bad spending, don't typically understand economics, or you wouldn't be for the spending on it. So it's a bad argument. You've got way better arguments if you think your point is defensible.
I write massive checks every year from my law firm for taxes. Okay, so I completely understand the economics of this. Like, it's not
no.
What
other people have things to say. There's another Ryan here too. I can beat you up some more if everyone.
There sure is.
Well, before anybody else jumps in, I'm officially going to remove over on the Raging Tomatoes side. I'm going to shut that one down. So if you haven't already made your way over to the Gauntlet, either catch the raid over or follow the link that I've put in the chat. If you know where you're going, head on over. We'll catch you on the other side. Okay, I'll leave it back to you guys.
I mean, the government only ever